It's Thursday, November 12th. Good afternoon. I'm Herman Green with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching online at onespotmedia.com. A task force is to be established to look at Jamaica's development agenda in line with the effects of climate change. The announcement came from Housing and Climate Change Minister Pernell Charles Jr. on Thursday. It comes on the heels of devastation in the last few weeks across the island, especially in East Rural St. Andrew. Mr. Charles was speaking at the renaming ceremony of the Victoria Mutual Chief Office and Duke Street building in honor of former VMBS General Manager Douglas Cover. O'Shane Master has the details.
Damaged bridges, roads, and collapsed houses. That's what a number of Jamaicans have been living with in the past 3 weeks following heavy rains which have impacted the island. It has led to the government looking at a number of measures to combat the effects of climate change. Of note, declaring some areas no-build zones. But for Housing and Climate Change Minister Pernell Charles Jr., a long-term fix is needed. Hence, he's looking at policy changes to include the establishment of a multi-stakeholder task force to look at the country's development agenda. Of utmost importance, the task force will be ensuring that the country's climate change adaptation efforts are sustainable.
That our infrastructure developments are carried out in a resilient way, and that the integrated actions are promoted across ministries, departments, agencies, as we partner with the private sector to address the issues that are relevant to our country.
The Housing Minister says the task force will comprise technocrats from the Ministries of Housing and Climate Change, Community Development, and the island's universities as well. In the meantime, Mr. Charles Jr. says the work to be done for sustainable housing solutions to move the country forward calls for all hands on deck.
We must encourage the homeowners to ensure that they demand sustainable products, and in turn, they must prepare to accept levels of responsibility that are required for us as a nation, Mrs. Cover, to achieve a sustainable, environmentally friendly, and climate resilient society.
Mr. Charles says he understands that it is now challenging as the island battles the COVID-19 pandemic and an active hurricane season, but says resilience is key.
Our population faces a great vulnerability, but it really reaffirms the determination and mandate of the government, while we keep health of the population as a priority, to ensure that our development is sustainable, and that at the forefront of our development is the need to do so with resilience.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
In the meantime, Mr. Charles Jr. is calling for more effective policies aimed at reducing the country's vulnerabilities to climate change. His call comes following the recent rains in Bull Bay, St. Andrew, in which torrential rains caused severe damage to several properties. For now, he says the ministry will be working with Member of Parliament for St. Andrew East Rural, Juliet Holness, to bring some level of relief to affected residents.
Yes, sir. The situation in Bull Bay is a prime example of the vulnerability that we have in Jamaica, and more so a prime example of the need for us to have better and more effective policies, legislation, implementation of projects to ensure that we can withstand the effects of climate shocks. And so we will be working with the Member of Parliament, a hard-working Member of Parliament, Mrs. Holness, who has reached out to us and who we will be going on a tour with her of her constituency to identify the areas where the ministry in our housing, but not only housing, but environment and climate change portfolios can collaborate to provide better and more positive outcomes for the residents.
Meteorologists say the tropical wave located off the East Central Caribbean Sea continues to show signs of development and will likely become a tropical depression this weekend. The system is expected to cause more rain over Jamaica. Managers of emergency shelters have been put on standby in response to the forecast by the Meteorological Service. Local Government Minister Desmond McKenzie says the decision was made yesterday following a meeting with disaster coordinators and the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management. Another meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. It's being suggested that the government considers approaching the International Monetary Fund, IMF, for a further delay to the debt to GDP target of 60%. This in order to effectively respond to the impact of the heavy rains on the road network and infrastructure. O'Shane Masters has the details.
President of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, Helene Davis-White, says the Prime Minister's intention to cut the budget of ministries to help raise funds to repair roads will not be sufficient. In an interview with our news centre, Mrs. Davis-White said the government will be climbing a steep hill in responding to the COVID-19 crisis and a natural disaster. She says they cannot be accommodated in the current budget.
I believe that the International Monetary Fund will be understanding, and you see, if that debt to GDP ratio is reduced, then more money becomes available to be used for these kinds of activities, which are about trying to, deal with the infrastructure as a result, the infrastructure damage caused by the flood rain. So I think they need to look at those things. It may not be what they want, but as I said, most countries of the world have had to make some shifts in their economic program and all their targets in order to accommodate what is happening now.
In May, the Finance Minister, Dr. Nigel Clark, disclosed that the IMF had agreed to plans to push back by 2 years the timeline for achieving the 60% debt to GDP target in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mrs. Davis-White says the need to identify new funds to respond to the crises is urgent.
I don't think the country can afford at this time to have more dislocation, and therefore if something isn't done quickly, I think the effects in terms of the economy is even going to be greater than is projected at this point in time.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
And it's time now for a break here on the Midday News, but stay with us. More stories when we return. Welcome back. We're continuing the news. The St. James Municipal Corporation says it will be clamping down on illegal vending on St. James Street in Montego Bay. Chairman of the corporation, Leroy Williams, says the illegal vending on that street is causing a major challenge not only for pedestrians but also motorists. Prince Moore has the details.
The Christmas holidays are a few weeks away, and some people are turning to any means to make money. This as COVID-19 has impacted the lives of many persons since March this year. But in Montego Bay, trouble is brewing as these illegal vendors are obstructing traffic.
There's also complaints coming from the store owners to say that they cannot even access their business places because of the vendors sitting in front of their places.
Mr. Williams says it is even worse because the vendors are selling the same products that the established businesses are selling, which impacts the corporation's revenues. It's why he says measures will be instituted to deal with the problem.
I am calling for a zero tolerance vending on St. James Street.
He says in a meeting with some of the vendors, designated streets were identified on which vending will be allowed.
Streets such as Church Lane, Lower Market Street, Corner Lane, Lawrence Lane, North Lane, Union Street bottom. But there should be absolutely, and I repeat, absolutely no vending on St. James Street.
Mr. Williams, however, noted if the vendors do not adhere to the new measures set out, the police will restore order in the town.
I have spoken to the JCF to ask them to assist us with the enforcement, as well as our municipal police will be at work also. So they are going to work in close collaboration.
In the meantime, Mr. Williams says the corporation will be implementing a vendor registration. This, he notes, will help to keep track of the vendors and their operation in the town. Prince Moore, TVJ News.
And we now go back to some rain-related devastation across the island as hundreds of homeowners in Bull Bay, St. Andrew are now facing the tough decision of having to relocate. A community already brought to its knees by COVID-19 now faces yet another test of fate. Prince Moore has the details.
For some residents living in Bull Bay, St. Andrew, it's a time many never thought they would face. Prime Minister Andrew Holness says at some point the nation will have to confront the issue of illegal and informal settlements. This comes as several homes across the country have been damaged by heavy rains caused by the outer bands of Tropical Storm Eta over the weekend. Minister of Local Government and Rural Development Desmond McKenzie has responded to calls to have sections of Bull Bay St. Andrew declared as no-build zones.
I don't think we have reached a stage yet where that, as far as I'm concerned, because it has to be the person and there are strict guidelines that has to be followed before you can enforce.
He notes that attention is being given to have parts of Bull Bay declared a disaster zone. This to encourage affected residents to move upland and desist from erecting more structures in low-lying areas. Minister McKenzie reveals that he's already in talks with East Rural St. Andrew MP Juliet Holness on how they will go about permanently moving those families whose homes are at risk of flooding again. Mr. McKenzie argues that the government is also focusing on relocating other persons living in flood-prone areas across the corporate area.
There are other areas in the corporate area that is of concern. New Haven is one, where the situation out there is less than fitting for human beings to live. Yeah. I'm just waiting to get from Mayor Williams a report on the visit that he made yesterday following discussions with me on the matter.
Prince Moore, TVJ News.
One man is dead and 2 others injured following a motor vehicle crash on the Municipal Boulevard, also known as I-95 in Portmore, St. Catherine this morning. The dead man has not been identified. The crash occurred shortly after 7 o'clock and involved a motor car and a hiace minivan.
On arrival, observation was made of a green Mitsubishi motor car and a IS panel van. The brigade got into operation and 2 persons were extricated and transported to the Spanish Town Hospital, while another one was pronounced dead by a doctor who was passing by.
The driver of the van and his 2 passengers suffered minor injuries. It's understood that the car was overtaking a line of traffic. We go on to news overseas. U.S. Senator James Lankford says he will step in if President-elect Joe Biden is not receiving intelligence briefings by Friday. The president-elect has also been prohibited from accessing State Department resources by the Trump administration because President Donald Trump refuses to accept Joe Biden's victory. We have details from the CNN.
And then there's the national security problem. We know from the 9/11 Commission that during periods of transition is the time when our adversaries know that we're most vulnerable. And so, Abby, it was interesting to hear Senator James Lankford, Republican from Oklahoma, come out and say it's time for President-elect Biden to be getting these high-level intelligence briefings. So listen to this.
There's nothing wrong with Vice President Biden getting the briefings to be able to prepare himself and so that he can be ready. There is no loss from him getting the briefings and to be able to do that. And if that's not occurring by Friday, I will step in as well and to be able to push and to say this needs to occur so that regardless of the outcome of the election, whichever way that it goes, people can be ready for that actual task.
Interesting, Abby, to hear Senator Lankford say he's going to take action tomorrow. If this doesn't happen, will other Republicans join him?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's such a tightrope that they are walking, that they're trying to pretend as if this thing isn't resolved, while at the same time recognizing that there are real life consequences to not moving forward with the transition. And you're seeing Langford literally in that clip saying, well, you know, maybe when it's resolved, Joe Biden might not be president, but just in case, we need to get him these briefings. Look, increasingly, it's becoming clear that the American people know that this is over. That recent poll earlier this week showing about 80% of Americans, including about half of Republicans, believe that Joe Biden has won this election. I think maybe it was a signal to many Republicans that this is the American public is ready to move on.
We go on to news in sports. Jamaican international Adrian Mariappa has signed a short-term deal with English Championship club Bristol City until January. If he impresses, the deal will be extended until the summer of 2021. Denise Walters reports.
Adrian Mariappa now becomes the fourth Jamaican after Damian Stewart, Darren Byfield and Bobby Reid to sign for Bristol City. With 160 Premier League appearances and nearly 200 in the Championship, Mariappa has plenty of experience in the top two tiers in English football from his two spells at Watford, along with stints at Crystal Palace and Reading. He's hoping to bring his expertise to Bristol City to help them gain promotion to the English top flight.
I'm still hungry to do well and maximise and play at the highest levels. It's something I've never really lost, even though obviously you get older and the perception is that you're whittling down. But I feel in great condition. And hopefully I can just add to the group of what is a very, very talented group already, and just help push forward.
Bristol City currently sits fifth in the Championship, and he says with the right attitude, the team can get into the playoffs.
You need good players. You need the right environment, the right mentality. The belief in everyone, and you need everyone pushing in the right direction. There's going to be tough times. I think that obviously the squad had such a good start to the season already, and even though they won 4 games on the spin and then lost a couple, but you see the character of the group, how they came through that, and have had some brilliant performances, and I think those are the ingredients that you need to just keep throughout the whole season.
Mariappa, who has 49 caps for the Reggae Boys, withdrew from the squad for Jamaica's friendlies against Saudi Arabia due to finalizing the deal. He was released from Watford at the end of the 2020 season after spending 11 cumulative years with the club. He will be available for Bristol City's next game of the season on November 21 against Derby County. Denise Walters for TVJ Sports.
And that's it for the midday package. But our next newscast is the primetime package at 7. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Herman Green. Good afternoon.